Rich, today we're on to another book review, a book that's made a big impact in our business careers, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team from Patrick Lencioni. It's a book that we've read many years ago. It's a book I actually recently recommended to one of our company's CEOs and their teams to read as a team. What has been your experience with this book? I know you have a lot of experience with this author. Maybe we should start there. What's been your experience with? I know you're a big fan.
I'm really happy. By the way, it's Lencioni, I found out. Lencioni.
Got it.
And one of the ways I found that out, we were lucky enough to have him on an event that was a virtual event for CertaPro last year. And I was able to use some of the podcasting skills by asking him some questions in front of the audience. And it was great. Came to find out that this book is 20 years old. Of course, I could have checked the copyright. I didn't. But it's 20 years old. Pat himself is shocked at the enduring nature of a book he wrote 20 years ago. And really shocked at that and proud of it. It's also so applicable to today. The principles haven't changed from 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've read a few of his other books too. I know The Advantage, I think, is one of them you've read. I have The Four Obsessions of a CEO. Any other books that come to mind that are as highly impactful as this one?
Yeah, a few of them. The Truth About Employee Engagement is one that is really good. As I'm looking at my bookshelf here, The Ideal Team Player is another one that's really good. If I had to recommend one, it would be this one, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, or The Advantage, because The Advantage was actually written for how do all of these things hang together. So when you take the five dysfunctions, when you take the truth about employee engagement, The Ideal Team Player, Hello's Politics and Turf Wars is another one. I actually wouldn't recommend reading that one. You can read The Advantage and get what you need to out of it. But all of these, how do they all hang together? How do they work within a company? And that's all framed up within the book, The Advantage.
Okay, awesome. So let's start with Five Dysfunctions of a Team. Why do you think that is the book that we should be talking about today to start?
Gosh, I think if you break down why functional teams work well and why dysfunctional teams don't, the number one thing that we see is it's at the bottom. If you've ever seen the five dysfunctions of a team, for those that this is a new concept with, there are obviously five of them, and they're depicted in the shape of a pyramid. And the very first one that's at the bottom of the pyramid is trust. And I'll tell you, John, if I look at dysfunctional teams, I would say easily over 50% of the dysfunctional teams that I see, it's trust that it all starts with. It's not that they need the other pieces, which I'm sure we're going to get to and we're going to review, but it's the absence of trust with people either on a leadership team or just overall within a business. And what you see when there's not a lot of trust is people tend to conceal their weaknesses. They are not vulnerable at all. They're not willing to say, I made a mistake. They're not willing to say, I'm sorry. They're not willing to say, I don't know. It's all about playing the best foot forward game and imaging, and it leads to politics. And without trust, you can't overcome actually the second dysfunction of a team, which is conflict. But I'm sure we're going to get onto that in a minute. But I'd say trust is a number one thing so many teams can work at. And when we talk about trust in this, it's not predictive trust. It's not, oh, I've worked with for 10 years, so I know what they're going to think. That's not the trust we're talking about. We're talking about trust to be seen, to show up as your...
Yeah. It's interesting, and to your point, let me just articulate what the five dysfunctions are, and let's come right back to it. So in the pyramid structure, you got the absence of trust being at the bottom of that base layer of that pyramid. The next one to level up is the fear of conflict. Up from that is lack of commitment from a team. Then it's the avoidance of accountability. And at the top is inattention to results. And what I find interesting with the top and the bottom, Rich, and it plays into what you just talked about, is at the bottom of the pyramid, and one of the dysfunctions is the absence of trust. And at the top, it's inattention to results, or really focusing on results in a different manner. It begins and ends with ego to a certain degree. And I thought that'd be particularly interesting, because what you talk about is, and this book, by the way, Five Dysfunctions of a Team, is not necessarily five dysfunctions of a corporate executive team. It could be five dysfunctions of a sports team. It could be
Yes.
five dysfunctions of a church or of a business or any kind of team that you assemble. It could be dysfunctions of a podcast team for that matter. But if you think about it from that perspective, the absence of trust and results oriented being ego, it's really where people are not vulnerable enough and they need to we talked about this in a different episode. They want to own the spotlight of the result versus it's the team's result, or they don't want to be vulnerable. They want to think they know it all and they're not willing to ask for help or say I don't know. So for me, the absence of trust almost feels like and I think Patrick talks about this a lot too. It's like the, oh yeah, duh, a team needs to have trust in order to be successful. Yes, but it's what does it exactly mean by trust? I think we should just dive into for a second, maybe a level deeper, because what you just talked about was the predictive trust. Is it fair to say I look at it similarly like integrity? People think integrity, and they don't lie, cheat, or steal, and deliver what you promise. That's integrity. But there's a layer deeper to integrity, which plays a little bit into these topics. With trust, it's trust someone's not going to steal your lunch. Okay, I get it. Trust that someone's going to do their job. Okay, I get it. But when you go a level deeper to the vulnerability level, what are ways that people can demonstrate that in your opinion?
And I think you're dead on that it is in the work vulnerability based trust. Those words go together as Lencioni defines trust. So it's specifically that. And what is on teams that are trusting, they're not holding grudges, they're not holding back, they allow themselves to be really known. It's an interesting thing. One of the first things that you do if you ever work with Lencioni and his consulting company, the Table Group, one of the first things that you do as any team, to your point, sports team or church or any team at all, is they have a personal histories exercise. And included in that personal histories exercise are a couple of warm up questions, but included in that is asking you about something from childhood that you had to overcome or that was difficult. I'm not sure exactly how it's worded, but that's essentially it. And what you come to find out is when people share something at that level, you understand better who they are, why they operate that way. You tend to give them a little bit more grace. Everybody has put something forward that they're not necessarily proud of. We're not playing the best foot forward game. But you understand why that person who is such a penny pincher on finances and just gets on everybody that they grew up with no money.
Yeah.
And they had recycled clothes constantly that had holes and they didn't have enough money to do the laundry. So they even smelled when they went to school. And they're like, oh, that's why Ron is so much of a penny pincher. I understand him now. And I'm not judging him for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they call that as well getting naked in the book, right? Getting
Yeah.
your team
That's actually a
together.
whole other book is Getting Naked.
Is it? I didn't
Yeah.
even know.
That's the name of the
Patrick?
book. Yeah.
Oh, really? A lot of it too, that can be very uncomfortable exercise, right? For people to do, but that vulnerability based trust and the ability to open yourself up, if you're willing to share that with the team, you're probably willing to share with them that you don't know the answer to the question they're asking, or you're willing to share other components in the workplace that kind of create that vulnerability based trust.
And once you've shared at that level that's deeper than talking about a project,
Yeah.
to be able to say on a project, I don't know, seems silly. It
Yeah.
seems table stakes. Like that's nothing in comparison to what we know about each other and how we bonded. And there are a lot of exercises that would work, a lot of them that we use in our business. We actually use from Brene Brown and some of her free resources on vulnerability and the exploration of it. And I just could not overstate the importance of focusing on that vulnerability based trust. And it's interesting with that pyramid, John, how they're all interlocking.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have vulnerability based trust on a team, you're not going to have conflict because people don't trust that they could jump in. And when we talk conflict, it's not interpersonal conflict, it's conflict about what's the best result.
Yeah.
So when there's a lack of trust on a team, that team is not going to have proper conflict to put dissenting opinions forward about a solution to get to what's the next part of that pyramid. So when you don't have conflict, how can you expect people to commit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
So
that's interesting. A case study for me on this one was I had two executives in a company that really weren't seeing completely eye to eye. Come to find out, they just didn't know each other. Period. End of story. They just didn't know each other. And it all came full circle when they actually had an experience outside of the workplace. It had nothing to do with work, but they ended up going to a sporting event together and they connected on a level they had never connected in the office before. And I remember the executives, both of them separately telling me, I just saw a different side of Rich. I get him now. And maybe it wasn't as much as getting naked and personal histories exercise, but it was just spending time together to build that trust. And now they can have that healthy dose of conflict, which exists in that second level, which, by the way, I actually believe when you think about, we talked about trust and integrity a couple of seconds ago, on that second layer of that dysfunction, the fear of conflict, if you have the fear of conflict with somebody else, obviously there's no trust established there. We get that. But I also believe that you lack the integrity if you're not willing to address the conflict on both sides. You've built an environment where it's not true, it's fake. So I'm curious, as we take a step further, what are some exercises that either Patrick talks about in the book or you've experienced where you can, let's say you have that trust level, people still aren't addressing conflict properly.
When you say it's fake, the term that's used in the work is actually artificial harmony. So everybody appears to agree. However, not everybody does. There's actually a term for it. When I went to the unconference before the pandemic hit in March there in 2020, was Tony's conference. And one of the things I learned from that was the Abilene paradox. And the Abilene paradox is where somebody would stand in front of the room and says, hey, who's in favor? Say aye. And everybody says, aye, aye, aye. And then the thought bubbles come up that say, hey, say it ain't, you've got to be kidding. Perish the thought. Heaven forbid. No, 1,000 times no. And that's what everybody's thinking, but nobody's willing to say it. So you have the Abilene paradox that leads to this artificial harmony. And in that case, there can be no of that next layer. There's no commitment because people really they haven't weighed in fully with what their opinion is. One of the ways that I have found to equip people to weigh in fully and to be able to really be comfortable doing it is I find when I contradict myself, and I literally will say in a meeting, hey, I'm going to throw out an idea that is just what's coming to mind for me. I am not fully bought into it. I just think it could be a starting point for maybe a better idea. And I'll throw something out. And it's literally that. There's no gamesmanship to it. There's no smoke and mirrors to it. And then I find if I set the context for, hey, anyone at the table, we are able to disagree with ourselves or contradict ourselves at any point in the interest of getting new information. Let's just do this together. Nobody has to have the obligation of defending what they just said. Yeah. You're welcome to turn on a dime if you had a better thought that just came up. And then when that happens for me, I just unabashedly go, you know what? I actually disagree with what I just said about 3 minutes ago. Come to think of it, in listening to the rest of the conversation, I think we should probably go the other direction from what I said a moment ago. And yeah. when people see me contradict myself and I'm facilitating, it sure opens them up to be able to just not have to have the right answers. We're here exploring together.
Yeah, you brought up, I think, a major component of this book that it took me a while to learn as an entrepreneur and leader, but it spoke about between the lines all over the place here. The speed of the leader, speed of the group. Speed of the leadership team, speed of the group. If the leader of the organization and you, the entrepreneur, are coming into the room and exposing vulnerabilities that you have to the team first and foremost, everybody will follow.
Yes.
If your entire management team does that, everybody will follow. If you open up meetings with, hey, I'm going to propose something, but I want you guys to challenge us because I'm not sure this is right. Give me some challenges. And people openly see others in the company not agreeing with you and you accepting that conflict and go, yeah, you know what, maybe you're right. Maybe I don't have this right. And you open yourself up as a leader. So too will your management team. So too will your company. It goes all the way up the scale on all 5 of these dysfunctions. And it's interesting because this book is a really good book for teams to read, but it's almost one of those books where the leader needs to read it first and demonstrate it. Because if the whole team reads this book and the leader doesn't execute it, doesn't it throw the whole book out the window?
But you brought up a good point, and one of the things that I learned from Pat's work is when it comes to vulnerability, the leader goes first. If it's just sharing, the leader goes last. So that should be, as a leader, how we order when we will contribute our opinions. If we're expecting people to be vulnerable, we have to lead and show them that's okay. And you go as vulnerable, as deep as you can go, and people are going to mirror that. And the reason you want to do that is if you speak last as a leader, everybody isn't comfortable yet. They're playing the cover up game, they're not quite
Yeah.
sure where we're at.
Yeah.
And the other side of it, if it's just sharing, if the leader starts by sharing their opinion, very few people will have a dissenting opinion after that. It's just easier to go, yep, I agree with what that person said, versus leader goes at the end. And leader goes at the end where you can pull out and validate many of the things that were just heard, lifting people up to share different opinions.
Yeah. Rich, what you just talked about is interesting. And I'm reflecting upon what I just said myself. And I had an experience a decade or so ago where the entire management team of a book, excuse me, of our company was provided a copy of the book and all asked to read it. And everybody read it. And we had a conference where we all got together and we actually talked about the book. But the overriding theme amongst the population that was there was, why are we wasting our time? And the premise was, we how can we all demonstrate these, how to resolve these dysfunctions if the leadership team isn't? So just a little gotcha there. If you're an entrepreneur listening to this, and you're like, oh, I'm going to get my team this book. You better make sure you demonstrate. And I love what you just said. Vulnerability, leader goes first. If you're just sharing, leader goes last. I never heard that before. And I do think artificial harmony is a major issue. Listen, we have artificial harmony every day. How's it going? Oh, it's going great, but it's not going great. And we artificially create the harmony. And I've never heard that before. But I think it's also good a lot of times for leaders to call that out. In other words, when you're sitting down with somebody, maybe it's a one-on-one or maybe it's a small group, and the leader goes, "Hey, team, how's it going?" And they go, "Oh, yeah, it's going great. It's going great." No, no, give it to me. Give me a couple things I need to be doing better. Punch me in the nose. Let's go. And when you open yourself up as a leader and invite the conflict, that really opens up people's minds as well. Okay, I can be honest here. I don't have to artificially create it. So,
Well, if we
uh,
use a quick example, John, in terms of we get together with some people on the team and we say, hey, leads are down. Here's the issue, leads are down. I think we probably need to turn it on with A and B. What do you guys think? And then everybody does
yeah, it's
the
great. That sounds good.
Abilene paradox. Yeah, 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 sounds good. When in the reality, what some people are thinking is, we've done A and B for the last couple of years, and that's what led us here.
Mm,
Just pouring more money into a failed marketing tactic isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. But unless there's trust, people are not going to weigh in with their opinion and say, you know what? I actually don't think we should keep doing A and B.
yep.
I have an idea. We've never done it before. Maybe we should do one and two, even though we've never done it. And then that person goes, okay, so what do you guys think about one and two? And then you start to see in a healthy team, it's almost, I picture someone with a clay pot.
Yep.
And you know how there's a lump of clay and that spinning wheel, and different people start to put their hand in it as the thing spins. And everybody gets to put their hand in it, and it forms this shape that never would have happened without everybody's contribution.
Yep.
It's literally, in my opinion, one of the definitions of synergy, which is we are able to get a better product together than we would have been able to get independently. The only way we get that is this layering effect when we create solutions and have conflict over what's the best road to take next.
Absolutely. And when you get that, you get to the third layer, right? So if you have that level of trust that's established and is strong and vulnerability based trust, and you're able to address conflict in a healthy and effective manner, you can then get commitment from the team to the point you just made. If everybody molds this piece of clay into something, and then the leader says, "Are you guys ready to go make this happen?" Everybody's, "Yeah, let's go. Let's go kick some butt." Versus if there's no trust, no one's addressing conflict. And in your example, the leader's like, "Hey, let's do more of A and B, get some more leads, let's go." And everybody walks out of the room. They look at each other going, does this guy not realize we've been doing A and B for years and it doesn't work? So that commitment level, the lack of commitment is layer three on the fifth, on the five dysfunctions of a team. And to me, Rich, we learned this really early on. I think that there's the importance of involvement of your team, input. And I heard a really good example about input where you're never going to get everybody to agree, potentially, right? Unless it's a fantastic plan, everybody's had their hand in it. But at some point, you may have half your team over here and half your team over there. And as a leader, you got to make a decision. You can't make everybody happy necessarily all the time. And I heard a really good quote that Jeff Bezos, when he has his teams together and he tries to get consensus on something, if he doesn't get full consensus, what he actually says is to the team that hasn't gotten on board with it, is says, look, we have to make a decision. I've heard from everybody. I've heard everybody's input. We're going to attempt to go with solution A. I'm asking for you guys to jump on board and let's gamble on this and see if it works. And we'll revisit it again together and reevaluate and see if your assumptions were right or wrong or whatever. But can I get your commitment to this? And firmly gets their commitment to go, look, I know you disagree with the direction, but I'm looking for you to take a gamble with me and give this a shot. And I love that approach because if you don't get the buy in from everybody, at least to commit to you, yes, I'll give this a shot. Let's go. You have half your team operating excitedly about the solution and half the team not.
Yeah, I think you brought up two words that are juxtaposing in this language, and it is commitment versus consensus. And consensus is generally known as just bad decisions slowly.
Yeah.
So consensus is we'll take a little bit of everybody's idea because we need to be really inclusive, and we'll make this Frankenstein of an idea that everybody has a little bit part of it and everybody can feel good about it. And we all agree. And that ends up being a bad decision that happened very slowly. Versus what we're looking for is commitment, not consensus. Commitment means you can disagree, but you must commit. So, one of the ways a leader can do that is when the conversation's being facilitated around conflict, around a solution, is just let people know up front, hey, I want you to know I am, or I want you to know Bob is the decision maker on this. Bob's going to hear what all of us have to say, and then we're going to go to Bob at the end, and Bob is going to call a shot, and we all need to be committed to the shot that's called. That being said, no shot has been called yet. Everybody's opinion is very welcome, and we want to weigh in and bring the best options to the table together now.
Yeah.
One of the ways you have some sense of organizational health, by the way, is when there's not a meeting before the meeting and there's not a meeting after the meeting.
Yeah.
There's one meeting where the smartest minds on a topic got together and the smartest minds brought their best ideas to passionately debate what do we do now with that particular problem that results in commitment by a single decision maker on that topic.
Yeah, and it reminds me episode a long time ago, one of my childhood heroes, if you will, Ryan Walter of the Montreal
Yes.
Canadiens. And he talked about before your management team gets out of this room and goes to the water cooler or goes there, get everybody's commitment that you're on the same page and that you've really got them locked in. So when they go to the water cooler and someone says, I don't agree with the change in the health benefit plan, that leader can address it from the company's perspective, go, no, we're committed to this. We just had the top leadership in the room. We're all on board. And then the bomb gets diffused, right? So commitment starts with really your top level executive team and, or to your point, get the right people in the meeting, get them committed. And as they disperse into the organization, you'll get everybody else committed. And so that takes us to the next level on the five dysfunctions of a team, avoidance of accountability, which is interesting. Fear of conflict and accountability play in a little bit because you have to be able to address conflict to help be accountable or help your team be accountable. And I think what Patrick talks about in this is not necessarily accountability. I might get fired if I don't do my job. It's the more team-based accountability, peer-to-peer accountability you can create, that's the strongest type of accountability versus somebody from upstairs going, you're not doing a good job, Rich. It's that people will perform stronger for their peers because they know their peers are watching them. We all committed to do this and you're not pulling your weight. We need you to step up. Creating that level of accountability in a team can be tricky.
And let's flow down the pyramid for a minute and go, how can we hold accountability to something someone's not committed to? And how can they be committed if they weren't invited to have the conflict on the solution to really weigh in before they could buy in?
Yep.
And how can you expect them to weigh in with their best ideas that somebody may go with or they may not go with if there isn't trust? So this just completely flows down the pyramid in that way. And you have a lack of commitment when there is a lack of clarity. You cannot hold accountability to something which is unclear. You
Mhm.
want to do a quick litmus test in any business? Go in the hallway and ask, hey, what are the top three priorities of the business, right? And ask that of the first three or five people and they should say the same thing. That would be organizational alignment and commitment. You cannot hold accountability to something which is unclear. There have to be clear and specific resolutions and a call to action. After that, now we can hold accountability because we're all aligned with what we are holding accountability to.
Yeah. In a demonstration that I listened very carefully to our podcast guests, Jeff Cohen's book, Countable. So when you do get a commitment, one of the biggest things you need to be doing in these meetings, we have a commitment. We know what we're going to go do. Who's doing what? And can we
Yes.
count on you to do this, Rich, John, David, Sarah? Doesn't matter. Leaving that meeting with clarity on who is doing what, and do you own that? Do you want to own that? Can we count on you to do that? And when someone commits to something and says, yes, you can count on me to deliver 10 leads or whatever the thing is, then the team will count on you for that. And you then you have to go back to that room and go, you know what? I apologize. And you have to be vulnerable. Based trust, I didn't achieve. And here's why. Attack it that way. So I love the way they interlock to your point. But that book from Jeff Cohen, Countable, came to mind as I was listening to you talk.
Yeah, that's great. And there's another side to accountability. That accountability up till this point, we've been talking about it in terms of deliver what you promised. Everybody was clear, you were going to do this. Did you do that? The other side of accountability is really kind of behavioral accountability. What that means is on a team, can you point out one another's behavior that holds the team back? There's accountability to your behavior on a healthy team. In other words, hey, John, in the meeting, I noticed that you were on your phone a lot and you were rolling your eyes
Mm.
when Mary was speaking a bunch. Not sure that really helped in terms of the dynamics of the group. I just wanted to check in with you and see if everything was all right. There's still something that is both accountability and there's a demonstration of genuine care. Hey, I'm just checking in with you. I'm not going to make assumptions as about what's going on in your life because I may come to find out that you just got news that something happened with a family member, a friend, or an animal, and rolling your eyes had nothing to do with it. And I just happen to misinterpret it. So I just think it's important that on a healthy team, we acknowledge there's also behavioral accountability to show up in a way that contributes well for the team to work together.
Yeah, you just brought up as well. You can't do that if you have the absence of trust. You can't do that
Yes.
if you have a fear of addressing conflict and just pretend everything's okay. So I love the fact that, and you particularly, Rich, over in our years, have that really strong ability to build that trust level, to have that level of concern conversation with somebody and address it in that way. I know you've done that with me a bunch of times in the past. It comes across very genuine because you do care about the person, because you really do trust and like that person and you care for them, but you also want to address the conflict with them in terms of, hey, what's going on? And maybe there's something else, but it's also a way of holding them accountable. So it all plays into each other.
I appreciate the compliment. I think I do that now. I think where you and I both grew up in business, it was not that way. I think it was used as a tactic. Like, hey, just wanted to check in and make sure you're okay. You're 5 minutes late for the meeting. And that's not what we're talking about right now. And you and I both started there, is holding almost this punitive accountability and acting like we were caring, but really we were communicating the message you shouldn't be late instead of just being really clear. Hey, you're late. That's not acceptable in terms of how we work as a team. You're going to need to be on time tomorrow. If you're trying to hold that type of accountability, just be super clear.
Yeah.
I think where you and I have both evolved to is we don't have all the answers. There may be something going on in that person's life that we don't know. And I think you and I have both been caught that when we make some assumptions about why someone may be behaving in a certain way, often we're wrong. And we've been caught by somebody saying, oh, there is something going on.
Yeah.
My wife got into an accident this morning.
Yeah.
You go, oh, that's why you're spacing out at that meeting. I am so sorry.
Yeah.
And we've both been caught that way. So it's been a learned thing, really, honestly, to be able to genuinely check in with somebody under the assumption that maybe I don't know everything that's going on. This didn't look great. It didn't contribute well, but what's happening with you that you did that? That's not like you.
That's it's very true. It's the maturity of leadership as you grow. Because you are right. I'm sure I used the same thing, the illusion of input tactic that we used to have when
Yes.
we were back in college. Let's
Yes.
pretend to give people the illusion that they're involved in the decision making process. We're just going to make the decision anyway. We're going to make them feel that way. It was like psychological warfare. We're just going to kind of play around with it. But then as you grow, you start as a leader and you start seeing all these different experiences. You're like, I don't know it all. I need their input, and we need to do it a different way and be more vulnerable and be more open and have that servant leadership mindset. And everything starts changing. But that's where we get to this fifth dysfunction is inattention to results. And I think the same thing talks about the maturity of a leader, Rich. So recent even in my career, it was all about chasing a result that no one else really cared about. I cared about it for whatever reason. I had a goal on the board that I wanted to achieve the goal, but the other people in the organization didn't give care about it. How to get that buy-in and that commitment to everybody achieving that result and everybody focused on the result. Maybe very similar to your point. What are the three priorities of a company? Not only can they articulate them, they also want to achieve them.
Yeah, and I think often when we think about inattention to results, it's easy to say people aren't paying attention to results. What are they paying attention to? But it's they're paying attention to individual results.
That's right.
The person who's wearing the marketing hat is paying attention to the results of marketing. The person wearing the sales hat is not paying attention to the results of production. The person wearing the production hat is thinking production only. What this is inattention to results is collective results. You know that you have a team who's paying attention to collective results when they're willingly making sacrifices in their area for the good of the team. When they're really looking at overall, we're not debating for my business unit, we're debating for the overall business.
Yeah.
And the value of collective success is valued much more than individual achievement. That is the focus we're talking about is collective results rather than individual results.
Yeah. I've had a lot of difficulty with this one.
Mm.
Right? People are motivated in many different ways, but one of the ways they're motivated is how they're compensated. Inflation's at all-time highs. I need to make more money. How do I make more money? And when you tie the results to maybe your compensation to the group goal that everybody's committed to, what ends up inevitably happening is when that group goal is not achieved, is like, I did my part and that person didn't do it. And then you start losing trust, and then the accountability goes off the chain because it's not genuine anymore. It's more about I didn't get paid because you didn't do something right. Now I'm pissed. And when you tie it too closely to their personal objectives, they don't really care about the results of the group and the whole. How have you been able to find a magic spot there? What do you think the magic spot is there? And I'm specifically asking about compensation at the moment. That's not what it's all about. But how do you motivate a team around the team result more than your individual result when a lot of our compensation plans are based on individual accomplishment?
Yeah, I think what we've found is there's a component of compensation that should be inclusive of the team results.
Agreed.
Often it's not going to be over 50% of the compensation, but there's a percentage of the compensation that if, let's say, I'm in production, you're in sales, and somebody else is in marketing, that the three of us do have a collective goal, that the three of us get together on a weekly basis to talk about what are we doing tactically? Are we on track or off track to what our quarterly objectives are? We might even get together quarterly and say, okay, who needs to do what to make sure that we do hit this long-term objective? The weekly part is saying, hey, John, are you red, yellow, or green on what you said as a quarterly objective? You go green. Okay, great. Hey, Bob, are you red, yellow, or green on the marketing side? Bob goes, I'm red. We're in trouble. Okay, good. Hey, Rich, where are you on your side? I'm green. What are we going to talk about next? Hey, Bob, you said you're red. What's going on with marketing? Now we go all the way down the pyramid. By the way, we went to accountability. We're weighing in on red, yellow, green.
Yeah.
Now we go back down the pyramid to go, now let's have some conflict about the best solution forward with Bob's lane And because we're all tied into it, we're all interested in helping out. Because I'll tell you what, if there are less leads coming in, the salesperson has less things to estimate or go out and sell. They can help out. They have enough time for some leads to help out getting them. If the salesperson is constrained and not selling enough, the production person doesn't have as many things to produce. They can help out with leads too.
Yeah.
So this team culture of having not just a goal, but to your point, having some compensation on it, any compensation on it, and then having this meeting cadence that supports it.
Yeah. Okay. You gave me a really good idea and a case study that I'm just thinking about in my own head. I asked the question, it's hard. I found it to be hard because you have individual based goals and compensation for an individual. Go attain your objective and you get bonus A. Okay. Got it. Then there's company based goals, which is if the company achieves X amount of revenue this year, you're going to get something. But it's so far out for them. They only control 1/100th of that piece. And so it's too far. They don't know where we're at. It's hard for them to track. It's hard for them to feel like they're contributing to it. And you hit a spot right in the middle that I don't know I've done enough testing with, which is okay, team A, B, and C, we're going to give you guys a small team goal of achieving this result. Because if you guys achieve that result, it's going to help the company achieve their goal. And you could set up multiple team based goals where they have group accountability. They're getting together, they're learning how to work with each other. But if the group doesn't hit it, none of them gets it. I think it's genius. And I never really thought about it that way. It's been more either I've done divisional based goals or I've done company based goals, but I've never done small groups to cross pollinate amongst different divisions. So I think that's a pretty cool way of doing it.
And you did go to compensation first, which I think
Yeah.
is very natural.
Yeah.
But if you think about how people are compensated and how people are recognized and rewarded, and what are you giving awards for? Does it actually respect what often requires a team environment for success? In other words, one of the things that we switch to at CertaPro is being able to recognize team awards.
Yeah.
Because just doing individual awards, so somebody in sales is competing against other people in sales and they're the sales winner, but the person who's the production person didn't win anything.
Yeah.
How does a production person feel? The production person's going, they wouldn't have won if it weren't for me and I didn't win anything.
Yeah.
Versus they are codependent. So you're going to go to your holiday party and recognize people. You're going to go to your annual awards conference and recognize people, but you're recognizing individuals instead of recognizing teams. And
Yeah.
then when you're recognizing the individuals, you're expecting them to go back for the balance of the year and work well as a team.
Yeah.
I think we have to look at how we compensate and recognize and reward people needs to respect and contribute to the team environment we expect people to have.
Yeah. Wow, Rich, this is I'm not looking for you to answer this question. It's more of a statement, but as we go through absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results, I said earlier, this is not just for a business, for all types of teams. If there's one team that needs to read this book, it's probably the government.
Yeah.
They probably fail in all five of these, and no wonder we turn on the TV or the news and we wonder why is it so dysfunctional? Isn't that amazing when you think
Yeah.
about it? Name another dysfunction that contributes to the dysfunction of not just the U.S. government, but a lot of governments. There's no trust at all. There's maybe way too much conflict. Maybe that's the one where they, but it's not healthy conflict. They don't commit. You can't count on anybody for anything. There's no accountability. They all go this way. And they're all focused about their own personal results, their personal, not the group results. So it's just very interesting way when you think about the dysfunctions applying to everything.
Yeah. I think one of the things you're highlighting for me when you say that is it's starting with the intention of wanting to work well together for the best interest of whatever the organization is.
Yeah.
So the organization is a football team, and everybody comes together with the intent to say, we want to win as a football team. And then we start what is healthy, functional teamwork from there via the five dysfunctions. Versus, I think in politics, people aren't getting together right now these days saying America first. They're saying their party first. They're actually going against, they have inattention to results organization wide, in other words, company wide. nationwide, there's a bit of an inattention to results because it is putting their individual interest of their party absolutely first. And there is no sacrifice or compromise for the best interest of all. It's, I have the right answer, other people don't. So the conflict isn't even functional. There's not this layering approach. It's it's a fighting approach. And you're right, that probably comes back to that foundation of where we started on the importance of trust, that two parties, three parties, and we're talking political now, which we often don't do on the podcast, but in any organization, having the multiple constituencies come together and really understand each other better.
No, but it's a great point that you're making, which is they're working for their own company's goal and
Yes.
result, not, excuse me, their own divisions, if you call them. Let's call the two different parties in government, if you will. There are two divisions of a company that don't really care what the company wants. They care what their division is going to get. And by the way, I've been in companies where that has been the case.
And they claim that they're doing it for the best interest of the company.
Absolutely. Of course they do. But they don't. Yeah, no, I love it. So great. Five Dysfunctions of the Team. Definitely recommend that entrepreneurs have not only buy into what's going on in this book, but first read it, buy into it, but then it's a great book, I think. It's one of those books that as the team reads it together and they apply these principles in their meetings and in their groups and they have a getting naked session and they kind of get through it, it really helps overcome some of these dysfunctions and makes you a more high-powered team. So please get a chance, read it. And I'm going to move on to The Advantage Rich because I have not read that book yet. And that's the next one I got to put on my list.
Is that a commitment that I can hold accountability to?
Maybe, but I don't trust you. Absolutely.